So I jumped right to, I believe I'm showing the right screen. Keith, am I showing the right screen here? I think so.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm just going to go into something really basic. I've actually gotten the question recently, how do I log into the cloud? For all of our add-ons that have a self-service wizard, if you already have an account with us, you're going to want to go into the Juice Cloud to install these. So there's a very simple login button here. When you click it, it's going to take you right into the cloud and you'll log in with your credentials. If you don't have access, you could register or hit forgot password. But I just want to rehash that, as some people do ask me, where do I go to sign in? So the best thing to do is go to juicetech.com, hit login. So that's good on that. Just to kind of go over the navigation again, once you're inside the Juice Cloud, you're going to see all of your active add-ons and those that might be on start trial. It's probably not going to look like this. We have every add-on active. This is our main user account. But you're going to want to go into, for this use case, Excel docs today. So we're going to open up Excel docs and we're going to do a fresh installation into a new application. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to authorize a new app because I don't think I have the one that I want to put it in, which I don't. So I'm going to hit authorize new app. I'm going to use an existing user token. I'm going to go down, I'm going to pick my last user token available because I believe that one's going to have what I need. And I'm going to select the lease management office hours application. For those of you who have been following along, I've been using this application quite frequently, so we're just going to keep using the same one. So once I pick my application, I am going to want to do the setup because those fields aren't there yet. And I'm going to select, for this use case, I'm going to do tenants and prospects, but actually, let me check before I do that. And if you look, I was wrong, properties and units. So one good thing to do before you finish going through the wizard is double check. Make sure that you have the right table that you want it on. In this use case, my property is actually going to be my master table, where my tenant is actually going to be my subtable. So I'm going to pick properties. That's just to avoid kind of creating duplicate fields or too many fields in the wrong table. So be sure that you double check where you want to have this button. So I don't have this button yet on this table, but we're going to put that in. I'm going to have the output file as a XLSX. If you want it as a CSV, very similar to Exact Forms Plus, you could always change it after. So don't feel like this is a hard and fast decision right now. Just whichever you prefer in the moment. And for the template to use, I'm going to use a standard template, although I do have a template that I have in mind right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit finish, and we're going to get those fields and a new table installed into my lease management application. So this is foundational knowledge. This is setting up the wizard. Does anyone have any questions on setting up the wizard for Excel docs? And just remember, this is foundational stuff. So if you have any questions here, this is important to know. Seems like everyone's pretty much there. So you have two options from here. Have you updated your installation fields to exclude JavaScript? We have, Laura. It's a great question. So all of the fields that get installed from the wizard now will not include JavaScript. Obviously, in the past, for those of you who have been with us for a couple of years, we did use JavaScript to open up a pop-up window for some of our document generation add-ons. We no longer do that, and any new setup will not create those fields. So great question. It will not update the existing fields you have, though. So I just want to make sure that's clear too. So if you have Excel docs, generate Excel docs in your app currently, this process will not go in and update those fields for you. You'll have to do that by hand or recreate these fields and start using these from now on. But that's a great question. I appreciate that. So this did just go ahead and make some fields for me, and I used that quick link to take me there. You don't have to do that, but that's just kind of a neat navigation tool. But you see that we get a couple other things installed as well. So we have the 4 fields and 1 new table. So I'm just going to close this out. That should really be it from the cloud. I just want to make sure that's clear too. Once you install it into your app, you're done. You can just go right into Quickbase, and everything else is going to be done within Quickbase. And again, I try to say this every week. If you feel that I'm moving too quick or you have a question, please stop me. I would much prefer to answer your questions as I'm going. because it will make life easier for me. So now that I have those fields added, I can scroll down to the bottom of my form and I can see they were not added. So I'm going to go ahead and add them. So I'm going to customize this form, scroll down to the bottom, and I'm going to make a new section. And I'm going to call it Excel Docs. Do the above fields, and I'm going to throw a couple of these back onto my sheet. And this is native Quickbase stuff. So this should look familiar to all of you guys. And these fields are all going to have Excel in the name, and I'm just going to kind of click through them just so we have that clear. So we have a pretty familiar look. If you notice, I actually have Exact Forms Plus right above this. So it looks very familiar. To jump in behind the scenes of the button, this again should look very, very familiar. So we have our standard URL. You're never really going to have to change that. We have some base 64 encoding to go into this. You'll never have to touch that. Essentially, everything up until line 6, you really should never touch. All this above here, that's standard. If you're editing that, you're either a pro or we're giving you instructions to do that. Definitely no need to edit that. So once you're on to line 6, this is your document template, exactly like Exact Forms Plus. So if you're familiar with Exact Forms Plus, you should already know. Trivia, this is the template ID you're going to be using. So it usually makes a new template for you, so a new record in that document templates table. For this example, it's 7. For many of you, it might be 2, 1, whatever it might be. If you wanted to change this, or you made another record, or you already had a record that you wanted to use, you would just put that record ID in there. FN, this is file name. So I know what my file name is going to be, so I'm going to change this right now to, unit release report. And something I'm doing is I'm also putting underscores in there. We could talk about that in a later video, but I like to have underscores in my names just so that if I did eventually want to use the batch version of Excel Docs, which we will not be going over today, you will have an easier time with the file name with underscores. To continue, 8 and 9, most likely you're not going to need to change. In certain use cases, you may want to point to a different DBID, a different table, in Quickbase lingo, but right now you definitely don't need to do that. Line 10, FAID and XLDDTE. So that's the file attachment field and the date field. Again, you really don't need to change these that often. If you happen to delete a field or you want to update a different date time field, you could certainly update this, but not needed. And as I mentioned before, when we were going through the authorizing of a new app, you could pretty easily change the output type. So this is the doc FMT, doc format. So if you wanted to change the output type to CSV, you would just put CSV right there. So that is basically a summary of all the parameters that we had, and app token, if required, can be put in right here. And this is just some closing rich text. This is what replaced the JavaScript that Laura had talked about before. So no need to mess with this as well. And unless you have something you would like to change, if you want to know more about that, we have information on our help site. You can definitely explore those options. So I didn't make any changes, so I'm just going to exit. And right now, this is kind of bare bones. If you can imagine this being your own table, you have your data in here ready, and now you want to make an Excel sheet out of it. A lot of times people who come to us for Excel docs already have something in mind. They already have an Excel template that maybe their end users are filling out by hand, or they're manually copying and pasting information from this record into an Excel sheet. This is a good use case to try to avoid and have Excel docs do the work for you. So I've got some fields here that I want to include, and I actually came prepared with a little template here. So we have a unit lease report with just a few, minor pieces of information here. And on this next sheet, I have a child table that I'm also going to be bringing over, but we'll do one thing at a time. So this is the Excel sheet I'm working on. For reference, I'm going to put this onto my other screen. So you might not see where I'm getting this information from, but if you made it this far, this is where the information is going to be coming from, and specifically getting the cell values, which I'll dive into in just a moment. So now that I have it on my table and I know kind of the fields that I want to have included, and I'm even going to drag this one on over here too, I can go in to my document templates table as I normally would and find record ID 7. So if you notice here at the bottom, I have record ID 7, and you actually see something a little different already. And for my eagle eye viewers, you do see I get a new document subtable Excel table. We do use a different subtables table, so it's not going to be in your typical document subtable. If you have Exact Forms Plus, it will be something new. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to open this up. Everything should look pretty familiar. I have some DocuSign tags in here as well, some additional information that you likely will not need. So I could go through customizing the form to take those out. I'm not going to go through that at this time. I'm just going to go through my first C list. So I'm going to pull up my Excel sheet and I'm going to look at here. So like I said, if you're an eagle eye, you notice a little bit of a different format for the C list. And this is, kind of a foundational knowledge. So if you're up to this point, try to pay attention because this is going to be important. If you notice, we have E7:D1. We're just going to delete that because that doesn't mean anything to us right now. What you want to do is you want to look at your Excel sheet for a master table. So if you want to generate fields from your master table where you put that button on. So, for this example, my master table is property and units. So if I want to put these fields onto that Excel sheet, so field 47, field 49, field 7, field 10, what you're going to want to do is find the cell you wanted in. And I kind of pre-populated these here just to help myself. You're going to find that cell. So for this example, the first one I'm going to look at is E8. And again, E8, for those of you who are not super familiar with Excel. So we're going to get E8. So I'll type that in, E8, colon, and then the field that I want to populate E8. So as I was just saying, and I'll just show you for this first one to make sure this hits home, E8, 47. Just like we would for Exact Forms Plus, except you just have to identify the cell you wanted in. And that's because we're using Excel docs. And then you're just going to end that with a period to move on to the next one. So I'm going to look at my form now. I'll do just one more with you guys, and then I'll kind of bang through them a little bit.
Hey, Matthew, it's important maybe to just note that it's not required on the template, right?
Right.
I know you mapped it, and
Yep.
it's great for your own reference, but just so people know that the template can be bare.
Right. Very good point. So I'll delete them as I go on. That is a good point. I usually recommend to my clients that I help set up to put your field in, just so you have it as reference. But like Todd just mentioned, you do not need the field IDs in Excel. And that's one of the differences between Excel docs and Exact Forms Plus. With Exact Forms Plus, you're not identifying a specific spot on the document unless you're doing the tilde field ID tilde. For Excel, by us identifying the exact cell we wanted in, which for this next example is C10, we know that that's where it's going to go because we can always find C10, where for Exact Forms Plus, we need to have those tilde field ID tilde values to find it. So again, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do C10. And like Todd said, I have it mapped so I can see that 49 is the right field. Just, for continuity, I'm going to be getting field 49, which is this unit status. So that's 49 there. And my next one, since I'm going kind of down the row, it's a C11. So I'm going to put a period, C11, and I'm going to do colon, and I'm going to do 10. Period. My next one, I'm going to be doing C12, colon, 61. And for the last one, just to kind of hit home, I'm going to be doing F10. And for those of you who have kind of merged cells, which I do have here, for example, it's important to not just kind of guess. You know, you can see that it's F10, but you might also find that you think it's G10 because it kind of lands on G as well. It's important to click on the cell that you're expecting it in so you know for sure what Excel is taking it as. So this is F10. And I'm going to be putting that in as F10:7. So that's all I'm going to do from the master table right now. Just a couple quick values, nothing crazy. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this version. So I'm going to do File, Save As, Browse, Documents, and we're going to call this 1.5, just so I know I have the newest version. And then just like Exact Forms Plus, you're going to update the newest template. Here's that 1.5 and save. So now that I have that all set up, I'm going to try to do this in a digestible way. I'm going to show you guys this master table, and then we're going to jump into the subtable, which is going to be slightly more complicated. So if this part doesn't make sense to you, I'm going to pause right now, take a sip of water. Does anyone have any questions based off of what I just went through? No?
Hey, Matt, I have a question.
I have an answer. Okay.
Can you use the EFP configurator button for Excel docs?
You cannot, I don't think.
No.
I don't
Good.
think.
No, it's,
Yeah.
I just want to point that out. If you do have Exact Forms Plus and Excel docs, that EFP configurator button, you might want to, hide that for Excel docs templates so that your users don't get, confused. Anybody who modifies your templates, you just want to make sure that they're not thinking that they can click those blue buttons for Excel docs, because it's really not going to be helpful for you.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. These tools are great. Little sneak preview, if you guys are listening to this, they might be coming out soon for Excel docs, so keep your ears to the floor. But for now, these two do not work for Excel docs. Good point. Thank you for pointing that out. One thing I will point out, James, who did PDF Stamper last week, did a great job. If you haven't watched it, go ahead and go back last week and watch that. We actually do use the same template file for Excel, where PDF Stamper we do not. So again, there's those little tiny differences just to keep your eye out for. But that was a great point to make. But to digress right back to this, we have our template in here, we have our C list, and I believe the C list looks pretty much good to me. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go to properties and units, and I'm going to generate it for this very last one. And it should just pull some minor information from up here. Again, this is very, very simple. This is ground level knowledge. So you're going to see we got one document generated successfully. My page is going to refresh. You're going to get the date that it was generated at in the Excel document there. So we're just going to open this up and take a peek and see what got generated here. Again, we do have some more work to do, but I just want to make some points here. So we have that data that got jumped in. You see actually here, even though I put two cells together, it still doesn't have enough space in there. So this is just native Excel stuff that you might have to do depending on your template. Again, most people come to us with a perfect template already, but if you're making it as you go, you have to see something like this and you could say, okay, I don't see St. Louis there. If you hit the top left and double click, everything is going to move out so you see the entire thing. The other thing you can do, if you want to just make it a little bit easier for yourself, is you could extend that column out and just make that one column bigger. You may affect other pieces of data in there, so just be aware of that. So usually my recommendation is just to click the top left and double click right here, and it will extend properly. And if you wanted to print the screen, again, this is super granular, super basic examples. You can get obviously much more in depth than this. You can go to your print preview and see what you're going to have here as a PDF. So that's all stuff to keep in mind. Okay, so now that we have that, I'm just going to close this out. We don't really need this anymore right now, but we can go back to our template, which is what we were using. And you know what? While we're here, let's extend this out a little bit. Let's make our lives easier. So if you want to merge cells, this is a little bit of Excel training here. I told myself I wouldn't do this, but what you can do is you can merge these cells together. So now you have E through H all merged together into one cell. So when I re-upload this the next time, hopefully we see that whole address fitting in there, and we'll take a look at that later. But now we're gonna move on to sheet 2. And sheet 2 down here, I guess it says sheet 3, but sheet 2 is really a way to explain this is it's almost like the report from Quickbase, but we have a lot more power. You could do a lot more customization to it. And obviously it's going to print in a way you're expecting. So I put a couple of fields at the top here, and we had Danielle from our team helping me out. So we see here we had some coloring in Quickbase. We really like this. It helps, our landlords kind of keep track of what they're doing with these properties. But I noticed that, okay, the new year went by, and now we have to change a couple of these pieces of data. So we have moving out and occupied. So we're going to try to recreate this. So the way we're going to do this is with an Excel subtable. So I'm going to go back into my template. So I went to a different tab. So I'm back in document templates, and I'm going to hit add new Excel docs subtable. So everyone take a breath. I know this is way different than our regular subtables, but this is an important piece here. This is where a lot of people trip up. So try to pay attention if this is what you're looking for. So again, we're trying to make this subtable to that properties master table. So I know that when I'll open it up here, when I go into these leases, I'll open this one up. I'm now in the leases table. So I'm going to take this DBID. The way you find DBID, or the way I find the DBID, is right after in the URL it says DB/ and up to the question mark is the DBID. That's how I was always taught to do it. So that's how I get it. If you guys have another way to get it, throw it in the chat. I would be interested to hear. But that's how I find it. So you're going to identify the table that you want to grab from. So this leases table. And then you're going to identify the C list. And the C list is going to be very similar to what we did on the master table. So you shouldn't have any issue kind of going through that. And we're just going to map this one quickly. And probably should have maybe had this done ahead of time just to save some time, but we'll fat finger this a little bit and go through it. So just bear with me. So on my left-hand side of my screen, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking at this Excel sheet. Oh boy, I'm all over the place now. Where do we go? Back here. All right. I'm going to be looking at this, and I'm going to go through each one and getting the field ID numbers. I don't know why this is giving me such trouble. Just make it full screen. So back here, if you look at it and you hit this drop down arrow and you hover over field properties, can you guys see that tiny little thing in the corner? I don't know if it's going to get any bigger. If you see right there, it says field ID 96 in that little gray area there. That's one little trick to get the field ID number. The next thing you could do is actually click on it and get that same URL, field ID 96. The last way to do it, and this is probably the most common way that it's done, is you just open up the table, hit settings, and go to fields. I'm rehashing this. We've gone over this in Exact Forms Plus PDF Stamper a million times. But for me to find those field ID numbers, it'll probably be easier to just look at it from that other table, because I'm really going to be recreating it. There we go. So I'm going to pull this to the side, and I'm just going to be adding this to my C list. So I know I'm going across the top. And something to also mention, just in case we don't understand this, if I pull up my template, we have column headers, and that's something important to note. So our first line for the subtable is technically row 2. And I'm going to be going through, thankfully we started this from A, so I'm just going to go A through I, and it's going to all have row 2. So that's how we're identifying kind of the header for us here. So I'm going to pull this up, and I know A2 is 96. And the next one, again, I'm just going from my sheet on the left-hand side. So I know B2 is And again, I might have had this done ahead of time, but we're just going to fat finger this in right now. This is how you would actually do it if you were doing it from scratch. So C2, 7. We have B2, 8. This term.
So Matthew, just
Yep.
while you're doing that, the concept is cell location : field ID dot cell location : field ID. So that's the construct that we're using here for the C list, which isn't a typical C list, obviously. So
Right. So I think that's a good point to bring up. When Todd's saying that cell location, that's that cell value that I keep mentioning. And we'll just do the next one together so that everyone can see it again. So I just did F, which was lease start. Now we're going to do G. So if you remember from sheet 1, I was clicking on, how to get that cell value. So C10. So I'm clicking on here because this is where I really want to start my table. This is kind of that first row. I'm clicking on this in G2. And if I look at the lease end on my Quickbase, I see lease end is 9. So I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to put period G2 : 9. And the last one I have, I think I have property rent value. It's 104. So I2 104. And I think we kind of account for it, but you don't want to put a period at the end. I guess I forgot H. And you don't need to have this in order either. That's actually a question we've gotten a couple weeks in a row. So I wanted to mention that. You definitely do not need to have this in order. The other important thing too that I'm just going to mention right now, you don't need to have each value in that in this subtable. So you might see all this and you might want this on a typical basis, but if I don't want other occupants, I don't feel like that, I don't see that I had any values in there. I can come back in. I could actually take out what I just put in. So let me take out H. So we don't even want it. So we go from G to I, no problem there. So that's the C list for this. Now, if you look at this, it should make sense. A through I, all of which are in that second row. So that's why I did A2, B2, C2, etc. And now we're going to put some additional values to this. S list, we're going to skip right now. For the query, now the query is probably a pretty important thing in this sense. We're going to be looking at C. So I'm not the best at queries, so if I'm doing something wrong, someone speak up, please. We also have some tools for that coming out soon. So we call this, or I call this, a little squiggly bracket. I don't know if there's an official name for this. Todd might know, James might know, but we're just
yeah,
gonna,
no, I think you're right. That's squiggle bracket. Yeah, it's a
squiggle
bracket.
Yeah. So I'm going to do field 97 is equal to, and then we're going to go and look at what field 97 is in here. So if you look, we're looking at property title. We want to make sure that we have field 97 is equal to this property title. So let's go in and let's click on one. And let's see property title field 97. So we're just going to copy that. I like to do it just, letter for letter. And again, this is probably not the most complex query. A lot of you guys could probably do a lot better job than me, but I think this is going to work for us. And so I just put some single quotes around it and another squiggly bracket at the end. For a description, I'm just going to put, data grid or leases. And I'm going to check, is data grid? Because we're actually making this as a subject. Curly brackets. Thank you, David. I think curly brackets sounds better. So we'll call curly brackets. And like I was mentioning, is data grid? We are going to check that here. Sheet. For sheet, we're going to go with sheet number 2 because that's what we're working in. If you remember on the Excel, I had sheet 1. This does say sheet 3, but it's really sheet 2. So we're going in sheet 2. It's related to the correct table already, because I made this from the master record. And the only other thing I'm really going to want to put in is this max line items. So we're going to put in 3 for max line items. And for the max line item type, we're going to do insert new rows. So Todd might be able to explain this a little bit better, but my explanation to clients is your table might exceed the bounds of what you have created in your template. So we might have more than 1, 2, 3, 4 records. And again, we're starting here. So 1, 2, 3. We might want to have additional rows. So we're adding rows, and it's going to keep all of the formatting based off of what we have already identified in our template.
Right.
Something that I'm not necessarily going to go into too much right now, but is important to note is all of your Excel formatting, all of your formulas will all stay true as long as they fit in the bounds of what we're putting the data into. So although this is blank right now, there is some formulas already, as you can see here, that are going to be, coming into effect. So I want to make sure that you guys understand that you have to do a lot of that stuff in Excel itself. That's really what we're getting a lot of power from.
Right, Matthew, the point of that really, like you said, is if there's additional configurations, footers, what have you, below the grid that you're trying to build, it'll just push things down, right? So it'll go 3 rows. Oh, what do I do? What do you want me to do next? Oh, insert new rows. Fine. So if there's more than 3 data records, right, subtable records, it's going to now push the rows down and basically expand that section, right? The other option, right, you said insert new rows, but the other option is insert new tab, which says, oh, after I put 3, no, in the max line type,
Yeah.
right? The other option is insert new tab, and that is, oh, after 3 rows, add a new tab.
Right. And that would be, again, for those of you who might not be following it, that's adding a tab here, almost like a new sheet. So just want to make sure that's understood too. Something else I'm going to throw in, and it might not work, I didn't try it. The least term, the least start, we're also going to sort by that. So I can see here that I have my least start, I believe is going to be, let's double check and make sure. Oh, inline table, no. My least start is field 8. So I'm just going to throw that into my S list, and this is going to kind of sort by least start. So we're going to throw that in there, and we'll see what happens. I'm pretty sure this query is going to work out all right. So let's go ahead and see what happens. So now that we have that all set up, let's go ahead and let's go back into our property, because we, again, we're making a sheet for this property. And we're going to go and we're going to do the master table values on the first sheet and this subtable values on the second sheet. So let's give it a shot. So we got one document generated successfully. And let's take a look at it. Now, if anyone could tell me what I did wrong, we'll have to send you a shirt or something. Let's see. Nice. Came out cool. But can anyone tell me what I didn't do that I said I was going to do? Probably not. What I didn't do was I did not save the newest copy of my template, and I didn't upload it. So the changes I made to sheet 1, those didn't reflect. So that's real end user stuff. If you don't save the changes that you made on a sheet, obviously they're not going to reflect. You have to save and upload those to the template. Those are mistakes you make every single day, so don't sweat it. Obviously, I just made one right now, but I made a change here. Thankfully, I didn't need to make any changes here because Danielle really set me up right. So as you can see, I had everything come across. There was 4 records. I have 4 records here. Anyone that had the property title St. Louis. And again, like I was showing you before, if you hit this top left kind of arrow here and double click, it'll extend out and give you all the values. One thing I didn't do was I didn't put other occupants in. I left H alone, and that was by design because I wanted to show you that you don't need to replicate your subtable exactly, your child records exactly. Yeah, as you can see too, there's a little bit of different coloring here. If I wanted to change this, we just had some conditional formatting. Again, that's a lot of Excel stuff here, but if you wanted to change any of that, you would just manage your conditional formatting rules, and you could always jump in and edit the rule and edit the format to pick a color. There's a lot of really cool stuff you could do with Excel. I'm not going to go into any of that right now. That is all high level. That's another meeting for sure. But based off of what I just did to get these subtable or sub-child records in, does anyone have any questions? And I know sometimes I talk really fast. So if there's anything you missed, or there was a step where you said, oh, how'd you get there? Let me know. And I'd be happy to go back in and re-explain. But if not, I will go in a little bit deeper on how you could also change this sheet. So I'm going to give everyone a second. If you don't feel like putting your mic on, you could always put it in the chat. It's always welcomed as well. And again, this was a basic Excel doc setup from scratch. We are using SSO. This add-on can be used, right? Keith, Todd.
Yeah, because user tokens, right? So these are all going to be user token based queries. So we would just require a user token.
Okay, Todd, I'm going to time out there because I guess I'm going to learn something new today. What is SSO? Am I supposed to know that?
Single sign-on. So
Oh, okay.
that's just a configuration within
Right.
their local network
Yep.
to get them onto Quickbase, but
Right.
we're going to utilize the user token for the access to the app.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that you showed Matthew at the beginning, right? And when you
Right.
set up the right.
If I were to go to authorize an app,
Yeah.
so from the very start, the very first step we actually do is we identify the user token that we want to use. So obviously we have a ton on file. For most people, you'll have one, and probably one here where you'll be able to click. If you don't see the one that you want to use, you can enter a new user token here. So you can just paste it in. You get user tokens from my preferences, and then manage my user tokens. I'm not going to open this up now, but that's how you would get that. So it's fairly simple to get the user token in there. That's for every one of our add-ons. So not just Excel docs, every add-on we utilize user tokens. So just keep that in mind. Does anyone else have any other questions? Can you use multiple queries? Good question. Good question. You're really putting me on the spot here, but good question. Yes, you can use multiple queries. And for those of you who have, kind of a more complex use case, you can come in and go to your query, and you can put in all caps, I believe you need, and, or I think you could also do or, but someone might have to spot check me on that. But you could do and then you could write an additional query. So if I wanted it to be, I have two Ford Motor Companies here. So if I wanted to have only Ford Motor Company, let's see, we're going to do it live. So if I wanted to have only Ford Motor Company, I would do curly bracket, single quote, 96, single quote, EX, single quote, we'll put Ford Motor Company in there. Forgot a dot here, so you gotta check yourself a little bit. Single quote. So now we're doing, okay, it's the property is St. Louis, and the company 96 is equal to Ford Motor Company. So realistically, I should be getting only 2 records from this. And do that. David, you had, can I use QID? Actually, a great question. I think that was something I was going to show, so I will show that in a second as well. Yes, you can. So right now we should only be getting back these 2 Ford Motor Companies. And we'll see if I did it right. Let's see. Let me make a quick report so I could show QID too. You absolutely can, which most people would probably prefer. Come on. Took a second. So if you go to the sheet, now you see just Ford Motor Companies there. That's that. And you can use multiple queries in one. So definitely a good question there. And if you want to see your formulas come in, I see my sum didn't come. Make sure you hit enable editing. And when you hit enable editing, your formulas will populate. That's something important as well. So
Now, Matthew, the other side of multiple queries would be another subtable Excel record for a completely separate query
Subtable.
to populate maybe another tab of data, say, you know what I mean? So that's the other. So Justin's question, I don't know if he was getting at a compound query or a more complex query like you have, or another query altogether, populating another tab with another table of data, which
Right.
is just another subtable Excel record. That's all.
So that's I'm glad we have two brains thinking, because that's a great point too. Just like Exact Forms Plus, I can add another subtable here. So if that's what we're getting at, yes, you absolutely can add another subtable, and I can identify a new point that I would like to start at. So if I wanted it to be, I wanted to have a table below it that started at A10, I could also bring in data from A10. And if I wanted to do that here, actually, what I do is I probably, maybe not the right way, but I would maybe copy this subtable, since I know I want to have it come from the same table, and we're going to take out just about everything. And let's just do E10. Let's do A10. Not going to sort this one, and we'll take out that compound part. Data grid is still the case. Max line items, I'm going to take that out, and we're going to make that blank. So let's see. If I save that, that's a much simpler version. Basically, what I'm saying is just take those two lines, plug them in right there. And again, let's just come back to the template so you guys all see this. Now you should have two records here, and both should get populated. So let's go back to my property, and let's press that again, and let's see what happens. Now the other part of this too is, of course, you could have it come from another table. So I have this tenants and prospects table here. If I'd had the time, we only have a little bit of time left, but if I had the time, I would show you guys making it from another table, which you can absolutely do. Let's double check and make sure that my logic is correct here. Cool. So here you go. This is with no formatting or anything like that. I just kind of threw this on quickly, just to show you guys, as Justin and Todd were saying. So that's just how you can quickly do Excel docs. Again, I keep saying this, very simple use case. So does anyone have any questions based off of what I just demonstrated? I'd be happy to answer them. Again, this is Excel docs, Excel. So if you went to our add-ons and viewed most popular, you're going to see that second one down. I like to call this the sister add-on or brother add-on to Exact Forms Plus. If you already have an account with us, don't hit start free trial, hit login, go to the cloud, and do a setup from here. But super great add-on. And this was foundational level knowledge. I just want to make sure that's clear, that this is, your very beginning knowledge. There's much more you can learn, much more you could do, which we will touch on in later videos. Any questions, comments, concerns? Todd, Keith, Justin, members of the team, anyone? All right.
You got Lori in there in the chat.
Oh, do I? I don't know. It didn't pop up. Can I use my custom reports added to an Excel docs? Can my custom reports get added to Excel docs? I think that's the QID that we were just talking about for a second. So yes. So if you had a report on the leases table, and I probably don't have one, but I could do upcoming lease ends, maybe. We'll just do list all. If I wanted to do all of my leases, not just the ones associated with the one property that I had, because I had it based off of the property title, St. Louis, Natural Bridge Road. If I wanted to take them all, I could find right here, QID equals 1. And this might be a mess right now, but we're going to give it a shot. If I wanted to take this whole query out, and actually we'll do it to the other one. This one looks a little bit nicer. If I wanted to go into this other one, and I wanted to take this query out, and I wanted to just put 1. Remember,
Hey, Matthew, just so you know, also the other thing you can do is actually type in list all. So
oh, I can.
so
Oh,
that you could actually, yeah, but try it with query 1, and then you could actually use the name of the report also, just so you know.
Okay.
So it becomes a little more
okay.
descriptive. But
I actually forgot about that. So that's a good point. But we'll use QID 1. This is report ID 1. And like I just showed you in the query, I put 1. And let's give it a shot. Essentially, this should show up around line 10, because if you remember, this one's only for this C list for these 2 fields. So let's give that a shot. Let's go back to properties. We'll use the same record we've been using. Click that button again. Successfully generated. And let's see what happened. And of course, you know, your reports don't have to be the list all. I just didn't come prepared with reports, but yep, there you go. These are all of the different properties with all the names. If I were to go back and see, every other one of them was just just St. Louis. Of course, you know, if you were to customize that report to be a little bit more of your own, which I'm sure you already have, you know, and that's just your native report customizations, you know, your custom columns, your custom filters, all of that should stay present once you create it. And again, you just have to go in to that query list and put in the QID that you found. Again, this happened to be the list all, so QID 1, it might be QID 101, depending on how many reports you have. That's definitely something important to note. And Lori, I'm glad that was helpful. I hope that, you know, you find use of it. And again, if you guys have any questions in the future, if you're watching this in the future, feel free to reach out to support@juicetech.com, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And of course, you could always go to the help site, which I believe Keith and Justin have both put on. You know, the help site's great, and we'll give you guys definitely the knowledge needed to this on your own. But based off of everything I'm seeing, it sounds like it's a very useful add-on. Do we have any free trial available for Excel docs? Absolutely. If you go and go to the cloud and hit start trial, but for Excel docs, because it should not be active, you'll be able to get started using this right away. It'll do the installation just as you saw here. This video should be up on YouTube tomorrow, and you'll be able to follow along step by step, and of course, do your own customizations to it once you get started. And again, if you have any questions, you could either reach out to support@juicetech, or go ahead and just make a support ticket here, as that is in the cloud for you. And if you're not in the cloud, please let us know, and we'll be happy to make sure you get access.
Matt, I got a question for you. You chose the list all report. But
Right.
the list all report had a bunch of columns in it. So when you displayed that, you know, there's like 6 or 7 columns there in the report, but in the output file, it only showed 2 columns because your configuration has to specify the columns that you want to show in the output, correct?
Right. I was going to say, was that a question or was that?
Well,
or is that a
it's
comment?
both. It's both. It's a question and a comment.
Yep.
So
Yep. Absolutely. And Keith's dead on. So we actually will take just what's in the C list here, because we're making that subtable. So I was looking at this sheet here, and I chose just these 2 columns. So although my list all report had all my default columns, I will only chose to update those 2 columns there. So if you did want to show all of the default reports columns, you would have to update that C list properly, which I did not. I just did the 2. It would probably look a little bit more like this. And just for your guys' knowledge, we have clients that have this going way the heck out. So there's really not much limitation to that.
yeah, it effectively helped with the query.
that's what I mean. That's what the point I was trying to get it to was the big benefit of using the report query ID is that you didn't have to type out that, you know, query the way Matt did. you're taking advantage of the report querying or filtering capability of Quickbase to be able to select the records that you want to appear. So, if you had 50 fields in that list all report, not all 50 fields are going to show up as columns in the Excel file, but the right records that you chose during your filtering criteria will show up, and you just have to customize the columns that you want to appear up in your C list.
Right. Yeah, because that definitely is a good point. You don't need to show every column every time. I think I touched upon that just for a second with this first one when I didn't want to show H. If you notice, I went from G to I. H, just other occupants was going to be blank either way. That was a very small subset of showing that. That's definitely a good point to bring up. So I think that's all we have for you guys today. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, like I said, support is respect, but we appreciate you guys joining us today. As always, we will be here next week. We actually have a special treat for you guys next week. It's going to be a good one. So please make sure you attend, and we hope to see you there.